Hello everybody, welcome to another podcast. Today we are going to talk about compassionate capitalism. Now depending on where you are in the world, it is I think it's July 15th, 2020, and there is a lot of, July 15th. There is a lot of chatter and riots that started out as race riots and really evolved into a discussion on the American economical system. Now, I'm in my mid-30s. I was in the muck of it 10 years ago when I saw the recession. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. And I really lost my butt big time during that recession. I had a lot of debt, and all around me, I saw these companies that destroyed the economy get lots of money. So I had some sympathy for like that whole 99% Occupy Wall Street, though I didn't agree with their solutions. The angst and the animosity of rich people getting richer, who wrecked the economy, getting bailout money really annoyed me. So I'm thinking a lot about compassionate capitalism and what is that? Is it evil, or is capitalism evil? And I think the main, probably this is one podcast out of many discussions, but the main thing I want to get at is capitalism can be compassionate, but really it's amoral. It's a thing like a gun or a knife or a pail. What you do with it is what makes it the thing. It's just a vehicle. So another thing to keep in mind with that word capitalism, meaning someone's capitalizing. Well, study history before money, and I'll give more of an elaborate maybe blog post on this, but even when you have communism, somebody is still capitalizing. So that I will go more on that in the future. Somebody is disproportionately capitalizing even when you have successfully implemented socialism or successfully implemented communism. You still have a disproportionate amount of people, a far slimmer portion of the pie, capitalizing. And I'll give examples on another podcast. So that's just keep that in mind, is you always have somebody profiting. There's no such thing like we're not on this trade and barter system. And even if we did, there'd also still be somebody capitalizing, whether it was brute force or organized crime. You'd still, even if we were just on barter, there'd still be somebody who was coming out on top. The question is, is it fair, and is there, fiscal equality among the most people who work hard? So the problem I have with crony capitalism, which I don't think is capitalism, is that is when the government basically keeps a business, a failing company alive on life support artificially, meaning they didn't have money, whether they didn't provide enough value or they outspend what they had in the bank. For whatever reason, they're getting taxpayer money, and I'm against that. So, and I'll go into some alternative solutions, and this is meant to be just a thought-provoking podcast. I really don't have a script, just a few bullet points. So, crony capitalism enables basically failing companies to stay alive, which obviously that's a good thing if they're employing a lot of people, and those people can provide food for their kids. I'll give another alternative to that. But what it also does is, when you bail out, when the government doesn't produce money, the citizens produce money. The government has to take money in order to give funds, so it has to redistribute. And if you are bailing out failing companies, that's less money going to the folks, meaning somebody who's unemployed, or another business. Let's say a business is actually expanding, they're providing value, and the government wants to give them some type of incentive to build more roads or build more widgets, to provide a service. Well, that money's gone if you're artificially propping up something that that society deemed unvaluable. There's lack of transparency. If companies just bail out, they just bail out another company, right? Like you then as the consumer don't have to hold them accountable. And I can give you a good example. We have like a local business here, and they talk about all the good they do for the community. And during the COVID outbreak, a lot of people went to this little pizza shop and they patronized the restaurant because they do a lot for the local community. There's also a local, they call it For Benefit coffee shop here in Indianapolis, and they are a nonprofit, and they give all the bonuses to their ministry, which is marriage counseling. So they sell coffee in the day, and they offer marriage counseling at night. Coffee House 5 if you're in the South Side area, but it's a very cool like for benefit business. So that's cool. That's capitalism. They're providing value, and when COVID hit, I patronized them. A lot of my friends patronized them because they're offering free marriage counseling. You don't have that. Like I could go to any other big retail giant coffee shop that's around, but I chose to go to this specific coffee shop, this local business, because I like the service they're providing for the community. I lose that ability when the government just gives people money. Government corruption is another reason why you don't want crony capitalism, because a lot of times what I saw was, and this is both sides. This is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. As soon like bankers become politicians and politicians become bankers, and if you ever want to do research about how Sallie Mae and Freddie Mac and the Federal Reserve work, they're not government agencies. They're like pseudo-government agencies. It's a really, really like uncomfortable, lack of accountability situation, and just so happens there's a lot of corruption there. Just study the Housing Market Boom and Bust by Thomas Sowell, where he talks about how what was it? I'm going off my head here, but Barney Frank is a government elected official, and he was telling everybody, "Oh yeah, the housing market's great, it's doing fine." So everybody invested in the Sallie Mae loans, and then the housing market crashes. So and Bernie Frank gets millions of dollars because he has access to insider trading as a politician, and he's not held accountable for that. So this corruption stuff is disgusting, and when there's people protesting on the streets because of inequality, I kind of resonate a little bit with some of that angst. So okay, now I've talked about like I've just criticized crony capitalism, but what happens, right? Like is it heartless for me to say that people shouldn't get bailouts? Is that heartless for me to say that companies should just fail and people should become unemployed? On the surface, it does sound heartless, but what I really think is a better solution than propping up failing companies is bailing out the folks. And you can do this in a plethora of ways. You can defer rent payments. You can do vouchers through the local grocery stores, and you can defer payments. You can give. I hate the fact of giving bailout checks, but you can give bailout checks. There's a lot. I would rather the money go straight to the people. If I had to choose, right? Like if I had to choose to give money to an unemployed person or the employer that shouldn't be in business, then I would choose to give it to the person, straight to the person, no strings attached. That also cuts out government bureaucracy, which is another kind of topic. Like the more regulation you have on money you have to give to an individual, the less money goes to that individual, or the less money there is to go around to the individual, because you have to have a central office administrate, and then you have government careerism, and that is where an individual does whatever they can. They're paid by the taxpayer, but they create all these boundaries and hurdles to secure their job. And that's why I think it was Andrew Yang had that UBI, and that was the I can't even remember what it stands for. But basically, everyone gets a check, and it's universal basic income. That's what it stands for. And what he says is there's no strings attached. You just get the check, do with it what you want, and you've already shaved off millions of dollars in regulations. Like you get rid of all the other welfare offices, and all those jobs that you're paying government employees that are being taxed. All that stuff's gone, and people just get the money. The money goes straight to the person. So I would rather it go that way. And I know I'm speaking kind of utopian, like I don't have specifics, but I would rather see something like UBI go to people, and then businesses that are providing a value get further incentives than propping up failing companies. So that's kind of like how I think capitalism can be compassionate. If we can identify those companies that are doing a value. I mean, look at like hospitals as an example. Most hospitals that I know that are nonprofit hospitals, I don't know too many, but I mean they are. I don't know many for-profit hospitals, but I know a lot of nonprofit hospitals where the people there are just diehards. I mean, they're providing phenomenal service to society. So the question is, like, when the economy is not doing well, we can talk to them. What kind of incentives can we do? Like, we have a hospital here in Indianapolis. They're a hospital, they're a nonprofit, but they have a gym, they have a school, they have work programs for Department of Workforce Development. And this is where they donate their extra profit from their hospital. How phenomenal. So why doesn't government talk to these nonprofits and say, how can we create more shovel-ready jobs versus something that, requires the government to give more bailouts? So that's all I have on this topic of compassionate capitalism. I definitely got inspired by this topic by the Joe Rogan podcast 1508 with Peter Schiff, where they're kind of talking about it. I would definitely highly recommend that podcast. It's a long one, but it's very good just to hear the back and forth between socialism or social programs and laissez-faire, libertarianism, or free market capitalism. I definitely recommend that podcast, and that kind of inspired me to go on this little rant. So stay safe out there, everyone, and thank you for listening. Talk to you later.